especially to Danny and Michael. Thanks a lot for joining us on another Meet the Maker session here today. These sessions are in general all about sharing experiences and information about building on Bitcoin and Lightning. I think we can learn a lot from the two of you today, so I'm very curious. And that's actually why we invite developers here, designers and content creators to join us here. But especially we invite also any listener to ask questions throughout the sessions to really keep this like these minutes interactive, because after all, I think it's a great chance to learn from each other and start building on Bitcoin, because it's actually not that difficult as you expect. And we will see also now why, together with or talk about it together with Danny and Michael. Danny is the founder of DCIO. It's a Lightning liquidity service. And Michael is the developer of Boltz Exchange. It's a non-custodial exchange for Bitcoin, Lightning, and I also I saw Ethereum on the website. So yeah, very glad to have you here. Maybe as an introduction, Danny, can you tell us a bit about your background and the first touch points when it comes to Lightning?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on this. So my first touch points with Lightning were, let's see, I think it was back in 2018, maybe. No, it was 2019. It was 2019. And I was at BitGo, and I really wanted to get into this Lightning stuff. And so I kind of convinced them to let me do a little project at BitGo, sort of researching into Lightning, getting up a node, running it and all that. And that's when I started playing around with my personal node. Ended up kind of shutting that down because, I didn't quite have the time, but then really came back about a year ago with the DZ node and started putting a lot more time and effort into it.
What fascinates you so much about Lightning that you came back?
Ever since it came out, I figured that this was going to be the way that Bitcoin payments would work for the mainstream, because it's instant and cheap. And so I was kind of just waiting for the network to be ready, the implementations to be a bit ironed out, and kind of always felt that, even when I first heard about it, I kind of thought this was the way things were gonna go with Bitcoin. And so I feel like it's the future, and I've always just wanted to be on the front lines of it.
Cool. Michael, what about you? What brought you into the space?
I got my first touching points with crypto and Lightning late 2017. I was mining some random shit coins on my GPU and swapped them to Bitcoin. And back in the day, in the late stage of the bull run, the on-chain fees were super high. So I took like a off-road to Bitcoin Cash, but that really triggered me going down the rabbit hole. I discovered Lightning and was like around when it first launched on mainnet early 2018, and pretty much went down the rabbit hole since then.
And why Lightning for you personally? Why it's so interesting?
Like as I said, in the beginning I wasn't convinced. I was even a little bit of a Bcasher back in the day, but once I look closer at what's actually going on, why Lightning is a preferable scaling solution compared to just making blocks big, it was obvious that this is the future of Bitcoin payments and the way that things should scale and will scale in the future.
And what have you been working on since then? Since you came into, or you got into Lightning?
As Danny said, in the very early days, things were a little bit rough. There was like very experimental support for nodes on mainnet. Everything was a little bit buggy, and there was like no applications out there at all. So I built a little widget which you could put on your website, and you could like enter an amount, and it would show your Lightning invoice. And it was like a tipping widget, and that pretty much took off because it was one of the very first few applications out there for LND. Lightning Network daemon from Lightning Labs, and one thing led to another, and in the end we went to build Boltz.
Maybe one step back, regarding the tipping widget. What do we still see it today somewhere, or what happened to this project at the end?
Pretty much nothing happened to it. It's not like it still exists on my GitHub, but like nobody's using it anymore because there are so much nicer solutions out there these days. But back in the day, it was like the only or one of very few applications you could even run on top of your own node. But like these days, there are much nicer solutions out there. It was just like for me to play around with Lightning, to build something on top of it, and to get a feeling for the experience as a developer on top of Lightning.
Yeah. Can you name some solutions today where developers or content creators, publishers, for example, can turn to?
Like back in the day, there were no hosted wallets. There was like nothing apart from your node that could like open channels, create invoices, pay invoice, and that was pretty much it. These days, there are smarter ways to put the QR code on your website with, for example, an LN URLs. And if you're just a content creator, not really a technical person who wants to deal with a Lightning node, there are surely bunch of applications out there, like for example LM-Bits, that allow you to like one click create a hosted wallet, one click create the LN URL pay QR code, put that on your website, and you can receive tips for whatever amount, which is way nicer than what I built in like 2018.
All right, that's cool. Have you already worked with LM-Bits before at some point?
I haven't, but a couple months ago in the beginning of the year, someone joined the Boltz Discord, and I like taught him a little bit about Bitcoin scripting and Lightning and what you need to be able to implement stuff on top of a Lightning node. And this guy ended up working for LM-Bits full time, and he did a Boltz extension for LM-Bits and is now working on like an admin extension and software as a service for LM-Bits, a more simple user-focused wallets and whatnot. And that is like my main touching point with LM-Bits.
Was this
Cool.
was this DNI Labs who?
Yeah, that's DNI Labs.
He was one of the winners of the first Shock the Web hackathons, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, that was the Boltz extension, wasn't it?
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, that got
well, and then we already have a great example, like how the different stakeholders of the ecosystem like fit together, right? I mean, there was maybe Ed, you want to quickly say something about Bolt.fun, like give the listeners a bit of a background there. I mean,
Yeah,
this is a great success if someone stays in the community and keeps building.
Yeah, so it was a part of our first Shock the Web hackathon, which was one of the first online events that we hosted back in March. It was very like web focused, trying to get people developing Lightning web applications. And one of the entries to that was DNI Labs, or Daniel. As you said, he kind of built this LM-Bits extension, which sort of allowed these on-chain Lightning swaps, which was really cool to see. And I mean, yeah, obviously since then, like you said, he's kind of stayed in the community. He's been active in your Discord, and I think he's actually been working on some other projects as well. So that's kind of what we wanted to try and do with that first event as well, was just onboard people. I'm not sure if he was actually already kind of in the space or not, or if that was his first kind of touch point with Lightning, but hey, maybe we can get him on the show sometime. But yeah, that's cool.
We should, maybe even together with Ben from LM-Bits, actually. All right. And Danny, what led you to work on DZ?
Yeah, so I guess let's see. About this time last year, I was at Cash App, working on the Lightning stuff there, and yeah, I was just just realizing that liquidity management is so important, and that every big exchange needs a way to be able to like loop out or use Boltz as a swap service to replenish their inbound capacity on demand. So I was like, oh, these swap services, this is a pretty important piece of software. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to build one. And so I kind of saw that Boltz was like already there and working really well. And for those that don't know, Boltz, and Michael, you can expand on this too probably, but Boltz is a submarine swap, so it's trustless, which is pretty cool. And that's similar to Loop, which is Lightning Labs' popular version of the submarine swap. So I was like, the submarine swaps are kind of they're kind of taken care of, and so I decided to do a different type of swap that's a little more trusted, where it would be like a simpler API, so it's a little easier in terms of the number of steps involved, but also a swap service as well. And I saw that need at Cash App because Cash App uses LDK, which is different than different implementation of Lightning. And so we couldn't really use Loop because Loop is like pretty tied to LND. It would just require like a lot of manual code. And then, so there were no like plug-in easy swaps to do. And Cash App just kind of wanted to have a partner with someone. They didn't really care about the trustless part. And so I was like, ooh, maybe I will make my own version of this swap that could be useful to someone like Cash App in the future. And just kind of for fun, and thought it would be useful.
Cool. Are you now like full-time working on DC?
Yeah, so about like a little over a month ago, I left Cash App and now working full-time on DZ. And yeah, in addition to a swap service, that was kind of just the first thing I put out, but been trying to just build any other things that I think node operators need or want. And so just kind of experimenting with new things now.
Can you describe a bit like if you know them, who are the users? What problems users have that they come to you and have them solved?
So I don't know who all my users are because the swaps are, I can't really tell who they come, where I can tell what channel the swap comes in from, but I don't know who initiated it. But that said, like there's the Discord and the Telegram where some people come and chat. It's a combination of other node operators that just want like a very cheap swap, like a loop out, and also some merchants who have a lot of inbound flows and they just want to automatically replenish their inbound liquidity. So that's for the swap service. But then also I have the earning feature, but maybe we can talk about that later. And those users are a little different. But yeah.
Michael, what was your story to build Boltz Exchange? I think it started like significantly earlier than DZ, wasn't it?
It's been a while already. If I recall correctly, it must have been early 2019 when we had the first like alpha release to the mainnet. And in the very, very beginning, we wanted to build a wallet that also supported Lightning. But we ran into this exact issue Danny described, where as a provider, you have to have liquidity management, and that just didn't exist back in the day. So we pivoted to building Boltz, which is like the liquidity management swap service, because of that exact need that Danny described.
What were the challenges that you faced along the way when building?
There were quite a bit. There were actually quite a bit, because like tooling wasn't around back in the day, at least not tooling as great as we have right now. Also, there was like very little reference code you could like look at and compare what are they doing, what should I do for my use case. That's just like wasn't around back in the day. And in addition to that, as Danny mentioned, like DC and Boltz might look similar from a high level perspective, but at the very low level, it's very different. That DC is this trusted service. Meanwhile, Boltz is doing this trustless submarine atomic swaps. And for those swaps to be trustless, there's quite a bit of technical complexity involved. So I had to learn Bitcoin scripting, had to get comfortable with the node implementation and its RPCs, while also being up to speed on what kind of features and RPCs and requirements do I have for the Lightning side. So it was like a holistic learning of all the Bitcoin ecosystem, nodes, RPCs, tooling, whatever is out there.
And what would you recommend as a user? So there's obviously this benefit of like these non-custodial swaps, atomic swaps. Are there also, for example, like downsides or like challenges for a user to use Boltz Exchange, where they in turn should rather go to DZ? How do they compare to each other?
I'm a little bit biased on that, but let's look at the comparison from the end user perspective or like integrators' perspective. Like these trustless swaps, of course, have one giant benefit. They are trustless. Boltz literally cannot steal from you, even if I tried. But that advantage comes at a huge cost when it comes to technical implementation and complexity. Like for a Boltz swap to happen, especially for a reverse one, going from Lightning to on-chain, you need to have quite a bit of Bitcoin scripting code in your own application to support it. And that's not easy at all compared to DZ's endpoint, where it is just like one HTTP post request with a Lightning invoice or like an on-chain address. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's about it. And for Boltz, you have to have your own keys. You gotta store. You have a script from Bitcoin script that you gotta keep track of. For normal swaps from on-chain to Lightning, you can't lose your refund details if paying the invoice fails. And there is so much additional complexity because we really wanted to get these things to have the atomic trustless advantage.
Now,
and for
that's
hold on, one last thing. That's for the integrator's perspective, and for the user, the complexity also means that a lot more can go wrong.
Now, that said, if you check out the Boltz website, I mean, you guys have done a great job making it just feel super easy. Like it's really, you just can click, 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 and boom, and it's going through. So, like, I would say great job on that, guys.
Thanks. Like this website that's online right now is the second iteration because like our initial website was actually pretty horrible. It felt similar, but it looked horrible and it was pretty buggy. I'm much better at back-end development than front-end, but this iteration is somewhat fine, I think.
No, definitely, I can totally confirm. Like this all what you explain right now does not really like arrive at the user. So you totally abstract this away. This is it's a great achievement, I think.
Yeah, like that was the intention with our front end, to have an easy way to access it. Because like if you build the service, you can't tell the user, hey, you go install Node.js now, generate keys, you store this thing here, and then you have a CLI parameter with 15, CLI command with 15 parameters, but you gotta have your keys, then the network, then the redeem script, and that and that and that. Like you can't do that. Nobody's gonna use it. You gotta make it easy and accessible, while also retaining the benefits of the trustlessness, which is like a really a balancing act, because the more you abstract for them, the more quote unquote trust is involved in your implementation.
And in the meantime, you also offer already an API for integrators?
Yeah, we offer an API. Like our front end does nothing that our API doesn't do. Like our front end just uses the API like every other client could.
And also, Danny, you also have an API, right?
Yeah,
I think, and these are great examples of like how building blocks come into life here in our ecosystem, because developers, they don't have to start at scratch and developing and working with Bitcoin scripts, but now they can already start with integrating services like you guys are building. It's very cool and makes the life of developers so much easier, I think.
Circling back to Danny's point earlier, DZ, from what I understood, and also Boltz, was built out of the need as a developer to have this thing. And the next generation of developers coming to Lightning can now focus on something else that's not just to solve the need for liquidity management.
I was actually gonna ask, who are your main types of users? Are they developers? Are they individuals looking to swap? Are they sort of larger orders with companies, wallet providers, things like that? Yeah, do you have any information on the types of users you guys have? Maybe they're different, maybe they're similar.
I can go first. So yeah, it's a combination for me from what I can tell, is that there's one thing that I like is the other developers who are integrating it into their projects. So like, for example, LNTXBot on Telegram, it integrated the DZ swap to handle on-chain payments, because you can it can only do Lightning. What I've seen is a lot of developers, they don't want to worry about on-chain stuff because they have like a nice Lightning app, but then their users want to like deposit on-chain or send on-chain, but they don't want to have to worry about managing UTXOs and all that. So there's a couple projects like LNTXBot, a couple others that are in the works right now that you may have heard of. I don't know if I should say them yet, but it's not really public yet, but they're integrating just to go like, so like their users can deposit on-chain or their users can send on-chain, which I think that's kind of cool, because that's what I'm trying to hopefully get into more, is like the back end rails of all this stuff.
Michael, do you have
Michael?
I can only confirm what Danny said. Like, we also have integrations in Breeze, the mobile wallet, RTL, and ThunderHub, which is node management software, and it's all over the place. Like, I would have a really hard time telling what the specific Boltz user is. We have all kinds of orders coming through at different times for different amounts for different channels. Like, it's all over the place. My best guess would be that people are using it for like liquidity management, but also for like doing on-chain payments and like other purposes I wouldn't have even thought of, because it's like such a very fundamental building block you can use for so many purposes.
Also, I think one of the things that people like about DZ and Boltz is that our nodes don't really close channels on people, whereas Loop, which is the common thing that people use to loop out, like send over Lightning and receive on-chain, Loop always will close your channel if you like get too many sats on their side, so it makes it very expensive to use their service, because you basically have to like go through an intermediate node to reach Loop, so that, because if you just paired with Loop and looped out with them, they would just close your channel, so you'd lose your inbound. But whereas Boltz and DZ nodes are more balanced, and so you can peer directly with DZ or directly with Boltz, do a swap, and then you're pretty confident that your channel is going to stay open.
Why is that? Why do they close channels and you don't?
So it has to do with I'm curious what Michael says about the Boltz node flows, but it has to do with the net direction of flows on their node. So Loop is mostly used for loop outs. So they just get a ton of Lightning coming in, and they have to provide on-chain coins to their users. And so they get to this situation where they have a ton of Lightning coins on their side, and they need more on-chain coins to send out. So they have to just close channels to harvest those coins so they can send them out. Whereas, and I saw that same problem when I first started, because my swaps I had very similar flows. It was all coming in. But I was like, I'm not going to start closing channels because that's a bad experience. So what I started doing is I would I had accounts on Kraken and Wallet of Satoshi and all these other centralized exchanges, and I was just like doing the opposite. Like I was sending Lightning to them so I could then loop out from them so that I could have the flows of my node more balanced. But that was not sustainable, and I was like, okay, this is not gonna work. So that's why I added this earn feature, where instead of me having all these accounts, I will just pay other people to make flows in that direction. So if anyone opens a channel to me, pushes sats through, and then hits my API, then I'll pay them and then close the channel. So now I'm only closing channels on people that like want them to be closed, and then I pay them for it. But yeah, it has to do with so now my flows on my node are more balanced, so I don't have to close channels of unsuspecting peers. But yeah, I'm curious what Michael has, what you would say about the Boltz node flows, because Boltz seems to be like a pretty balanced node as well.
Yep, and it's not easy at all, because I think it's the same for Loop, you and me, that it's mostly been from Lightning to on-chain, and as a provider, you like accumulate balance on the channels on your side, which is like not sustainable. At some point, you're gonna run out of inbound. Recently for us, that dynamic somewhat changed, where the flows of swapping in and out are more or less roughly equal, which like balances the node. And I've never been too big of a fan of the loop approach, where you just close channels on people. Like I get why they do it, but I don't like it for like the users who like are trying to get some inbound or just like provide a routing hop on the network. And it also makes Loop ridiculously expensive to route to, because effectively all channels that Loop has are more or less professional routing nodes, or like at least sophisticated routing nodes. Opening channels, having the sats flow to Loop, and then getting closed on, which is not super nice for like everyday people. So we are trying to avoid that. It's not easiest, and we have used similar solutions as Danny in the past, but now flows are more or less equal, which balances things out.
And did something change why flows are now equal compared to before?
We didn't change a thing. I guess it's just up to demand, that right now people are more willing to swap into the Lightning Network than just out of it. Which is like an interesting development, but I have no idea why. But I'm really happy about it.
Yeah.
And you, Ernie, you Danny, you built an earn product out of it, like you set a different incentive structure there to balance everything out. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically I was like, what I was doing was not sustainable. I was like hitting limits on all these different accounts, and I also didn't want to just have to manage all these accounts and have custody with other providers. And so I was just like, okay, I would just pay anybody who wants to do this arbitrage thing, anybody who wants to take that risk of the custodial, if that's what they're doing, or they can just, I don't care how they're pushing sats through my node, but if they can do it, I'll pay them, it's like a 1100 ppm fee. So now I have like a nice dedicated group of arbitrageurs that like kind of provide the node liquidity every day, and I sort of pay them every day, and it's all automated, which is nice.
Yeah, that's good. I like this a lot. To see this as an opportunity also, to like also provide then again value back to the community and give them a chance to earn something. Maybe because they have a similar but like opposite situation on their side.
Yeah, and also as a smaller, the other thing that I noticed when my node was smaller is that it's really hard to get any type of routing volume when you're like a fairly small node. And a small node is like 1 Bitcoin. Like that's a lot of money. And but even that is like hard to just get any routing volume. And so, but just because you're like, who do I open channels with? How do I focus my um, like how do I get selected for how do I be useful to anybody? And so that's why I like this earning feature, because it allows you to like play a role in the Lightning economy where you plug into the liquidity network of my node with your own strategy, but you can have a very targeted approach that gives you like a reliable return on your coins based on the risk that you choose to take or not take.
Dare I ask, is this kind of like the Lightning version of DeFi? Or, you know, it seems like a really good way for people to earn yield on their Bitcoin. Kind of, I mean, it doesn't seem passive. It seems a little bit more complex with regards to, you know, dealing with a few nuts and bolts here and there, but it seems doable, right? And a lot of people probably have Bitcoin sitting in cold storage, not doing anything, not earning them anything. And as Moritz said as well, it's also a nice way to give back to the network by providing you a service, or node operators a service, or just providing sort of liquidity to the network, right? So seems kind of like a win-win. But am I getting something wrong there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of nervous about this whole yield farming thing coming to Bitcoin because it was kind of a sketchy thing in Ethereum world. But also like with this, you know, the Lightning liquidity markets they're markets, and there's going to be arbitrage opportunities. I think the way people are earning the most right now is they're actually like kind of siphoning liquidity from exchanges like, you know, Kraken or Bitfinex or Wallet of Satoshi, where it's to the detriment of the liquidity of those exchanges, where you can come in and you can like send to your account on these exchanges and then withdraw on chain, and then like basically you're sort of like putting pressure on these centralized exchanges to get their fees right, because right now a lot of them, you know, they have a lot of channels and it's hard for them to price their liquidity properly. And so these people are kind of coming in and like siphoning off their liquidity and reselling it at a higher price. But it's also putting pressure on them to, you know, solidify their fee policies so that they can protect their liquidity.
Can you? Oh, sorry. Did you want to finish?
I was gonna say, yeah. So I don't know if it's necessarily a win-win, but it is making the markets more efficient. But the lose a little bit comes from these exchanges where they have to be more active in their liquidity management as well.
Right. Okay. I mean, you also mentioned the word arbitrage, which I've heard and come across quite a few times when hearing about nodes, and I think there was even something that was released from Amboss a week or two ago that actually sort of said that it was going to make opportunities to find arbitrage a little bit easier. Can you explain a little bit to people who might not necessarily know what it is? Like, what do you mean by arbitrage, and like what's kind of happening there? Is that kind of just what you explained, or?
Yes. So you can think of like, okay, when you do a swap with DZ or Boltz, or I guess a reverse swap, which means you send over Lightning and you receive on chain. So you push your liquidity to the remote side of your channel. That act of swapping is like buying inbound liquidity. You can think of it like that, because there's going to be some fee involved. And if you're swapping with Boltz, you're buying inbound liquidity from Boltz, and Boltz will charge you a fee for that. And now you have coins on their side of the channel, which is sort of like potential energy, like because those coins are pointed towards you, they're ready to route, and now you just have to find somewhere to like sell that liquidity to, in a sense, like give it somewhere to route to. So what you could do, for example, is, and I don't know if like this is a simple example. I don't think the price works out necessarily all the time, but you could open a channel with DZ. You can do a swap, push the coins to DZ's side, and that'll cost you like 1100 ppm or something. And then you can take those coins and open a channel to Loop, and set a fee of like 2000 ppm. And then you can just wait, and eventually, hopefully, you'll route coins all this way. And then you'll have made, since you spent like 1100 to buy this liquidity and you sold it off to Loop at 2000, you've just made a profit of 900 ppm. And now realistically, that is like, that should work eventually, but like those prices are a bit high. Like that particular one doesn't work super well because it's a bit of a high price. But you can do that on same thing on like by opening a channel with Wallet of Satoshi and like sending your coins to your Wallet of Satoshi account and then withdrawing on chain and then opening to Loop. And that's sort of the custodial arbitrage that people do, because you like buying liquidity from Wallet of Satoshi is pretty cheap because of the way they structure their fees. And then you can sell it for a lot more to Loop and it'll route pretty quickly. So that's sort of the arbitrage that is going on.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, I think. I guess you got to play around with it though, right, to kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end, I mean, it makes it all like the whole network becomes more efficient the more people try to exploit this arbitrage or arbitrage opportunities at the end. I'm curious now. So the two of you've been like quite some time already working on Lightning and on Bitcoin. Michael, what can you recommend to other developers who start building on Bitcoin? Like based on your experience, any challenges that you face or and solutions that you found that you can now pass on to others?
Developing on Bitcoin, like for the Lightning side, I gotta say that it's now much easier than ever before. Like if you have an open mind and look for solutions, you're probably gonna find pretty much anything you need for building on Lightning, and that suits your specific needs for what you're trying to build. Whether that might be liquidity providers, places you can swap at, APIs, or like tooling for your node, whatever it might be. So that's pretty nice these days. And not every builder on Lightning wants to do the same thing in the end. Like there are very different use cases. Some might want to run their own node and handle everything on their own. Others might want to focus on the product side in the beginning. And there are also really nice solutions that are pretty much hosted for you out there already. Like for example, River, I think it was, now has an API for like handling all that Lightning stuff for you. And you just call an API, get invoices, can pay invoices. And if you don't want to focus on the Lightning side, but more of the product side you're trying to build, that's surely a nice thing.
Cool. Danny, what could you recommend to new developers joining this ecosystem, for example, where can they get first information about building on Lightning?
I would join, there's a lot of Telegram groups for different projects. There's a lot of open source projects. I would maybe think, so the first thing I would suggest is just try to build anything, like even if it's really crappy, because you're going to learn something. And the other thing is contributing to other open source is always a good thing, even if contributing is like literally just fixing the README file to make the instructions more clear. Like that's how you get started with open source, because then it's like, oh, actually, there's a fix in the code and it's a one-line change, but and then you can do that, and then you start reading the code, and then you get more comfortable with one file in the big project, and then you can branch out from there. So just kind of getting started is the most important thing, I think.
Assuming
to that real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Even if you're experienced developer in like any other field effectively, one thing you gotta keep in mind is that when you build on top of Bitcoin and Lightning, is that you are effectively working in fintech now, and you are doing everything from custody to payment provider, like everything. And you gotta keep that in mind at all times. It's very different to like normal software as a service or like whatever it might be development. And I think Danny is very right in his opinion of get started with some simple projects just to get your hands dirty, get a feeling for it, because in the end you're dealing with money here. And if things go wrong, which they really can, it hurts twice, because your software failed and you lost money. So get your hands dirty on something that can't really go wrong, or with money you're comfortable losing as like a fee for your learnings.
But I also think that definitely like starting with open source projects is a nice way to get into developing on Bitcoin.
For sure,
Because
especially contributing to like existing open source projects.
exactly, yeah. If you guys are not working on your main projects right now, do you already have another idea, product idea in mind regarding Lightning, or even a side project that is that people should know about?
I'm trying to keep things focused with between the DZ platform and also this Tau wallet that is getting some people are interested in it. And so, yeah, I'm kind of just trying to stay focused, but also like, I think there's room to innovate. Like, I really think it would be cool for somebody to have like a very simple way of getting yield on their Bitcoin by like a one-click. Like we're almost there with Voltage, where you can just almost one-click node, but then you have to manage the node. So it's really hard to get any yield. But I think it'd be really cool to solve that case where it's like just normal user wants to go to a website, click a button, deposit their Bitcoin, keep it in self-custody, at least in like a cloud app that they can, like a cloud server that they control in a sense, and give them like super easy return on their Bitcoin. But yeah.
What about you, Michael?
I'm also trying to stay focused. There's so much to do, especially now with Taproot, and since we're doing on-chain scripting, it's like it has been its own journey, because like Taproot in itself, developing on top of it is not easy at all, especially since some parts of it are still experimental, or like the specs are still work in progress, like for example multisig, the new one, the music. Getting on top of that is not easy at all, so I've been focused on that and some other things brewing at Boltz. But I wanted to circle back on the one-click yield farming on Bitcoin. And I don't think I like the comparison between DeFi yield farming and like Bitcoin routing fee arbitrage either, because it's not similar at all in so many ways. Because like, I'm not sure how familiar you are, or like our audience is, with DeFi yield farming and what it was back in the day, but it was essentially one click, provide liquidity, another click, farm, and that was it. Arbitraging channels and routing fees on Lightning is very, very different from that. You do not only have to run your own node, which is like can be a software as a service one-click deployment, but like having your liquidity and channels in place to actually make a reasonable yield for your risk, because in the end it's a hot wallet that you have in Lightning, and also your effort that you put into that. Making a reasonable yield on top of that is not easy at all. And as Danny said, especially small nodes, sub 1 BTC, are not really attractive for the flows to go through. Some things might work, like Danny also mentioned, exchanges, which have lots of coins flowing through it and going in and out. That has worked by accident on my personal Lightning node, which like I have a channel to Kraken there, and it just routes through that without any management from my side. But we are so far away from like one click you farm. That's like not happening right now. You're gonna be very sophisticated to do that, and I don't think it is gonna happen anytime soon because like you gotta adapt to the market's needs, and pretty much front run what is going to be needed in the future to make a really good return on your BTC that you risk effectively by having them in hot wallet.
Well, but at least like, of course, there's no free lunch, right? You have to work for your money at the end. But at least like, even simpler services or to rebalance your channels, to swap in, swap out. I'm sure that we will see that. And you guys are a great example of that already.
So one thing that I put out like a couple weeks ago is this Copilot concept where basically it runs next to your node as like so you can host your own node, but then delegate management of it to a third-party service. And you can kind of already do this you can almost do it with macaroons with LND, and you should be able to pretty soon. And I think you can already do it with runes in Core Lightning. So the concept is basically like you let somebody control your node, but they can only like open channels, close channels, set fee rates, and rebalance. And then if you can do that and you're willing to give up like your node's data, then I think we might be closer to a point where you can just click it, let it run, and some intelligence service can manage your node for you to get you your return. But that's kind of where I see it possibly working. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of people don't want to give up their data.
First of all, that and like LND had that feature since ages. And I think there's also a Lightning plugin for it, which is called like an autopilot for opening channels and setting fees, which is like algorithmically. LND is built in, setting as a plugin and like DCL bus, but those are not really working out. Having someone manage it might be an option, but then you got to think about incentive structures. Like what's their incentive to give you the good alpha for where to find good fees when you earn all of the cap, all earn of the fees. So like, why would they give you that information? It's really tricky.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm wondering is if the third-party manager can be better than the autopilots, which are the algorithmic ones don't seem to be very good. But I wonder if like, yeah, I think you'd have to give it to someone with a good reputation, and you would have to see like, okay, every week or every day I'm making this amount to the point where you're like, okay, I don't care if they're, maybe they're scraping off 1 or 2%, but if I'm making 3%, like maybe I'm pretty happy with that. But yeah.
But I think it's a super, like it's a great opportunity for people to join in here and develop new services, right? I guess there's so much to explore, and also depends on. I mean, there are different routing nodes, maybe more like central ones, maybe more on the edges. Also depends on their channel partners. They all have different needs, for example, and also then could use a different service when it comes to rebalancing the channels. So we are like approaching the full hour. Do we have any question from the audience?
It's been a bit of a quiet one again today, but it's been really fun to talk and hear a lot more about these kind of things. I was actually, I've been trying to thinking about setting up my own node as well. So it's just really interesting to hear a little bit about what you guys are kind of talking about. And obviously, as you said, you got to be careful with funds. And I think I probably would be obviously a sub one BTC, probably like way below one BTC node. So, but I kind of want to do it just to experiment with it and give a bit of liquidity to the network if anyone will use it, and just to figure out a little bit more about what you guys are kind of talking about today. It might not earn me a yield or anything like that, but it'd definitely be a great way to sort of feel the effect of Lightning and the power of it as well. So hats off to what you guys do. It's really cool to hear about.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, maybe then like a final round. Oh, there is a question.
Sorry, there was actually a question. Yeah. If I have an Umbrel, how can I get on Boltz or these services? Is there an Umbrel app for Boltz or for DZ? Are you guys gonna look to do something like that? This is actually interesting because I was probably going to set up a node with Umbrel as well, potentially. So this is a nice one for me.
So with both of ours, you can, on your like separate computer, you can open up Boltz Exchange or DZ.io, and you can do this, like initiate the swap flow from there, but you have to like copy the invoice and then go to your Umbrel and then pay it. Or if you have your Umbrel connected to like Zeus, where you can send from your phone that connects to your Umbrel, then you can go on a website and do the exchange like that. Personally, we don't have a DZ app for Umbrel, but that's a good idea. And then I'm not sure about Boltz, Michael.
That you can always use the website, and there is a Boltz app for Umbrel, which works together with the RTL app for Umbrel. So if you have both installed, the Boltz integration in RTL is going to work.
Perfect. Cool. All right, then, like last question also from my side would be like, what's on the roadmap? What's next for you, and how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So next on the roadmap, I honestly, for me, is a lot of just hardening scalability and security of my service, and yeah, I'm not totally sure what's next, but we'll see. And then also,
that's good enough.
Yeah, the Tau wallet. We have our web wallet that's pretty much close to launching, which is going to be cool. We are going to just a nice little USD wallet for you, and yeah. Oh, and how can you get in touch? Oh, definitely for me, Twitter is probably the best, but also Telegram. Maybe it can be linked in the. Is there a way to link it in the comments, or see? I'm
sure,
at
you can do that.
At Danny Diekroeger on Twitter, or actually just on my website, dz.io, deezy.io, and then towards the bottom there's some social links.
We will put that in the description of the video.
Cool.
What about you, Michael?
For us, the next steps are, like, of course, security, hardening, making sure everything works. That's like top priority. And then we are working on Taproot for swaps, which will make them more private and cheaper on the on-chain footprint. And we are working on integrating Liquid on-chain to Boltz, which has been tested for a while now, and we are planning on launching that on mainnet sometime soon. People can find us on at Boltz HQ on Twitter and on our website, Boltz Exchange. All of our socials and like blog and whatnot are linked at the very bottom.
Wow, super cool. Thanks a lot. So cool. I think we learned a lot today again about like Lightning liquidity management. I have the feeling we've come quite far as a whole ecosystem. There are great building blocks now in place that new developers can use to build up on, provide even better services, and also that make their lives easier. So thanks a lot, Danny and Michael, and to all the listeners for joining in today. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in this topic as well. And yeah, also feel free to let us know what topics you would like to see covered in future episodes. Get in touch in the comments and yeah, send some sats if you like these shows. See you next week.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
soon.
Have fun.
Thank you. Bye.